Greg McElroy joining us to talk about the weekend. And Greg, thank you. Let's start with LSU. We talked earlier today, and you had some really interesting opinions about not only what happened during the game, but the effort. I think we're all pretty interested in where you are on this LSU football program.
Well, I was insanely disappointed. I was also equally impressed with UCLA, and we've talked for the last couple of weeks, Paul, about UCLA. I think this is a team that's best football's in front of them. UCLA's for real, and people wanted to make their first performance at, well, it was Hawaii. No, that team's legit, and I think LSU ran into a buzzsaw on Saturday, but what was most troubling was the inability to tackle some players on the defensive side of the football in particular, making business decisions and not necessarily bringing the same level of effort that they would have had the game maybe been a little bit more competitive. I was just really disappointed with the defensive performance, all things considered. Now, UCLA did some things to make life difficult on LSU, but there were some things that I saw on that tape that were somewhat alarming. And if there's one thing I know about Ed Orgeron is he's able to connect with the players. Well, I didn't think the effort from some of the defensive players in particular was what it needs to be from this point forward. So I think Ed Orgeron needs to get that addressed and get it addressed quickly, because if they put another performance out there like they did on Saturday, they're going to lose a handful of games this year, and a few games that they probably shouldn't based on the amount of talent that's on that roster.
Now, Greg, I think most people can understand what you mean when you say business decisions, and you hear that phrase late in the year when a team is skidding and going nowhere and maybe is going to a bad bowl game or not going at all, but this is the opening night of the year. Am I missing something in college football? Players are now making those decisions at this point of the year?
I mean, it's definitely been kind of going in this direction for a little while, though, Paul. I mean, the collective buy-in that you see universally is just not there anymore. I mean, it's just, with NIL and all the wonderful things that have been benefited, and recruiting, frankly, dating back a million years. I mean, goodness, things have changed really over the last 15, 20 years as players have become a little bit more focused on their own individual performance and maybe less about the greater good and the collective good of what the team might need. So, yeah, it was pretty disappointing. But by the way, they weren't the only team this weekend where we saw this. There was few different occasions in which guys weren't tackling very well, and their effort to try to tackle wasn't very good as well either. So I think that's what's most troubling. And look, the one thing I will say about LSU and the one thing I'll say about Ed O was hired because he could really invigorate that locker room. The guys loved Ed Orgeron, right? They love Ed Orgeron. They love playing for him. And he doesn't care, and he's going to empower them, and he's going to get them fired up, and they're going to play hard every single week until they don't. And I think Ed O needs to figure out a way to press the right buttons this year, because last year things went off the rails a little bit. They finished strong, but they went off the rails a little bit throughout the course of the season with some really high performances, some really low performances. I really don't want to see the same in 2021, because if they continue to play the way they played on Saturday, like I said, they're gonna lose 4 games, maybe, if they play like that. They've already lost 1. They will easily lose to Alabama, A&M, and a few other teams in the SEC potentially if they don't get things straightened out and get them straightened out quickly, especially on the defensive side.
Greg McElroy with us. Let's get to the big game of the weekend. And it seems like I know you've been talking about it, and you did a game last night, and I want to get to that in a second. But just your treetop takeaway from Georgia, Clemson.
What a war, right? I mean, that was an old-fashioned slugfest. What it wasn't was real pretty if you're an offensive enthusiast. Now, while I think both defenses really showcased a level of dominance that is difficult to really wrap your head around, both offenses, I was left a little bit scratching my head. I didn't think the creativity was there offensively for either. I didn't think the offensive line on either side really did all that well. I think Georgia did what they needed to do, understanding that there was absolutely no way that Clemson was going to be able to put a drive together. I didn't feel, Paul, at any point as if Clemson's offense was just going to flip the switch and they were going to turn it on. It never felt like they had any chance. It really didn't. So I think Georgia went into it thinking, man, we might need to score some points, but when they realized how much of an advantage they had in the trenches when their defensive line was on the field against Clemson's offensive line, They went into conservative mode, said, hey, man, let's not mess this thing up because our defense is dominating. Clemson's not going to gain an inch tonight. So it was a remarkable defensive performance from Georgia. It was also a fairly good defensive performance from Clemson. But if either one of those two teams wants to get back into the mix to win a national championship, I think Clemson, by the way, the likelihood of them getting to that spot is almost zero. They need a lot of help. They need Georgia to lose at least 2 games. They need Alabama to lose at least 2 games. They need other teams from other leagues to lose 2 games, because if you look at Clemson, they will not have right now, based on what happened in the ACC this weekend, they will not really have any marquee victories. They might have a few good performances, a few good wins, assuming some of the teams in the ACC improve, but there's not going to be that notable statement resume builder victory. So they need a lot of help, I think, to get back in the mix. And if they don't get that help, then they will find themselves on the outside looking into the playoff. But for Georgia, they're in a great spot. It was a great win. They didn't have their best stuff. So I think they get a little healthier. They get some of their pieces back, especially a wide receiver. And we could be looking at a different Georgia team here in the weeks to come. They need to sort some things out offensively, because that performance offensively did leave quite a bit to be desired.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.